Greetings viewers, in the next couple of videos we will be going through a brief tutorial on OpenCV. OpenCV is a module that's particularly meant to deal with tasks like image and video processing. It is a really popular module. In this tutorial our aim will be to familiarize ourselves with the most used OpenCV functions and reach a point where we can manipulate those functions to suit our needs. And also in particular we will be trying to use OpenCV with the language Python. Now before we get started, this is the index slide. All the topics that we are going to discuss in this tutorial are listed here and will be explained and discussed in this very order. Now that that's settled, let's get started. OpenCV stands for Open Source Computer Vision, an open source module whose code scripts are generally available to the entire coding community in an unrestricted manner. And like I've already said, it's a module that is meant to deal with image and video processing. But more importantly, it's worth noting the fact that OpenCV has been created using languages like C and C++. Once the fact is known, it begs the question, why and how are we going to use OpenCV with Python? Well, the answer is, while C and C++ are primitive languages and can be executed in a really short time, they aren't as much user friendly. So, in order to balance the trade-off between speed and being user friendly, we use Python, which is known for being user friendly. Python has a technique called wrapping. You can use a function programmed in any different language in Python by using this technique. The execution happens in the original language, that is C and C++ in this case, but the commands are given in Python. That's how we use OpenCV in Python. Now, the next thing that we will be discussing is the science behind display. Is what we see always the same as what's displayed on the image? Yes, but no. As a matter of fact, when we look at a color scheme, what we look at isn't a single frame but three different frames overlapping on each other. When separated, they will look something like this. And if you're wondering how three different colors are emitted from the same spot simultaneously, this is your answer. A screen is composed of several small units with separate regions in them to emit each of the three colors red, green and blue. In short, displays exploit the fact that majority of the colors that human eye can see can be expressed as a combination of red, green and blue. Not only that, we also can vary the shade of a color by varying one or more of the fundamental colors, that is red, green and blue. The pixel screen generally looks something like this. The next thing that we'll explore is how do pixels on a screen know which color that they're supposed to display. Since computer language is all about a combination of zeros and ones, the information about which color a particular pixel is supposed to emit is also given as a combination of numbers. These numbers range from 0 to 255 and depict the particular shade of the color that they represent. You might be wondering why 0 to 255 in particular. As I've already mentioned, computers store data in terms of zeros and ones. Therefore, when we try to count the total number of combinations possible using 8 memory units, which can store the value of either 0 or 1, we get a total of 256 values. There is even a pattern in which these numbers are stored in a picture file. It looks something like this. There is even a pattern in which these numbers are stored in a picture file. It looks something like this. This is an arrangement called bitmap, where three number combinations required by each pixel is stacked up in an order. A bitmap is a method of storing images using pixels. It is called a bitmap because it is a map where the bits of information are stored. This information is stored as a sequence of numbers defining the color of each pixel. The next thing that we are going to discuss is the concept of color space. We have seen so far that all the colors digitalized can be expressed as a combination of red, green and blue. We can compare this to a 3D space where R, G and B serve as the reference axes for red, green and blue. But is RGB the only possible reference for the color space? No, In fact, we have a total of 5 major color spaces. That is CIE, RGB, YUV, HSL or also called as HSV, and finally CYMK. We will now be going through each of the color spaces and examine their features closely. The first one is the RGB color space. As you already know, RGB stands for red, green and blue. The chromaticity produced by this color space is a 3D space defined by those primary colors. Each color has a range from 0 to 255. As you can see, the graduation occurs something like in the figure shown. The 3D space would look something like this. The next color space that we are going to look into is the LAB color space. It follows the CIE color visualization principles. The LAB color space is a combination of 3 color values that are close to red, green and blue. They range from 0 to 100 when it comes to the L axis and minus 128 to 127 when it comes to the A and B axis. They can reproduce any color that the human eye can perceive. Its 3D visualization would look something like this. Now that we have seen two different color spaces, let's see how the conversion of a picture from one color space to the other works out. As you can see on the screen, there is an RGB image. In fact, whenever a computer tries to read an image, it always reads the triplets that represent the shade to be emitted by a pixel in the format of RGB. But when you try to give an OpenCV command to convert one color space to another, what you will be trying to do is you will be asking the computer to change its default format and read the data as LAB in this case instead of RGB. And once that's done, the image would look something like this. The next color space that we are going to look into is the LUV color space. As a matter of fact, the LUV color space is very similar to the LAB color space. The only difference is that while in LAB color space the A and B axes vary from minus 127 to 126, here the U and V axes vary from minus 100 to 100. And other peculiarity about the LUV color space is that there are some highly saturated colors that cannot be expressed using the LUV color space. Now let's try converting a picture from RGB color space to an LUV color space. Here the picture that you are seeing on the left is in RGB format. Now after conversion of the picture from RGB format to LUV format, it will look something like this. The next color space in line is the HSV color space. HSV is a very peculiar color space because unlike all the other color spaces that we have seen so far, which follow the rectangular coordinate system to express the 3D color space, HSV color space utilizes the polar coordinate system to express the 3D color space. H stands for hue, S stands for saturation and V stands for value. It describes colors in terms of their shades and brightnesses. Hue's range is from 0 to 179, while the range of value and saturation is from 0 to 255. As you can see in this graffiti, the value of hue when is varied gives you different colors, while when you try to change the height, you are trying to change the value and that will give you a change in the intensity of light. And when you try to change the saturation, you are trying to change the intensity of the color that the hue represents. Now let's see how a color conversion looks when we try to change a picture from RGB color space to HSV color space. The color space conversion from RGB to HSV would look something like this. The final color space that we'll be looking into for now is the CYMK color space. The major difference between CYMK color space and all the other color spaces that we have seen so far is the fact that CYMK color space is a subtractive color scheme where all the other color spaces we've seen so far were additive color schemes. Now, what is a subtractive color model and what is an additive color model? Well, when you try to add two or more colors to get the color that you desire, then it is called an additive color model. But when you're trying to take a key color and subtract its components in order to get your desired color, then it is called a subtractive color model. CYMK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow and black. In the figure shown here, the one being shown here is called cyan, this is magenta and this is yellow. The major application of CYMK color space is in printers. You might have often observed that the cartridges has 4 compartments and the 4 colors in those compartments are also the same as these: cyan, magenta, yellow and black. As you might know, white as a color is a combination of colors available in the entire visible spectrum, which means that if you desire to obtain a particular color, you can obtain it by filtering all the wavelengths of colors that are not necessary. This can be achieved by using the CYMK color visualization. So now viewers, we have come to the fun part where we'll be trying out everything that we have learned so far in a hands-on session. We will be using a site called Google Colab where we can write up our codes and execute them online. So now viewers, we have come to the fun part where we'll be trying out everything that we have learned so far in a hands-on session. We will be using a site called Google Colab where we can write up our codes and execute them online. We expect you to be ready with 2 minimum requirements before getting started with the hands-on session. The first thing is that you must have a Google account, and the second thing is we hope that you are ready with some or the other kind of color image on your desktop or PC. Now let's get started. Type Colab in your search box, and the first link that appears in your search result will be the link to Google Colab notebooks. Double click on it and you will be prompted with a window asking you to choose to open a Colab notebook. If you haven't worked on Colab notebooks prior to this, then you won't be having anything except for the welcome to collaboratory notebook. So you can choose a new notebook. Now when Colab notebook finally opens, this is how it will look. The first thing that we are going to do is we'll go into the snippet session and we'll look for a code snippet that can be used to load files from your local computer. So this is a snippet that you were looking for. Open files from your local file system. Click on the arrow and the snippet will get loaded for you. Delete any unnecessary cells, and when you run the cell, it will ask you to choose a file from your PC. Click on choose file. Once you click on it, this window will pop up and you can browse for the image that you would like to download and use for the image processing. Now I am loading the file. It will show you how far the download progress has gone. If you click on file, once the loading is complete, your image will come over here. To create a new cell, you can press Ctrl MB, and now in this cell we will be writing the code to import the modules necessary for image processing. First thing, we will import OpenCV, import CV2, and the next thing that we will be importing is NumPy as MP. And after that, there is a small difference between running a code in Google Colab and running a code in an offline code editor. The thing is, there are some functions that might run in the offline code editor and might not run in an online code editor like Google Colab. So cv2.imshow is one of the codes that wouldn't run here. So instead of it, we'll be downloading an alternate code line, that is cv2_imshow. And to do that, we'll be typing from google.colab.patches import cv2 underscore imshow. Once you run this, all these modules and commands will be imported. Now that that's done, we'll create a variable called image, and in it we'll use cv2.imRead to read the image file that we intend to load into the variable. Now I'll copy the path of the picture that I've loaded, and in inverted commas or single quotes I'll paste the path. When I run this cell, the image will be read and the data will be stored into the variable. The next thing I'll be doing is Ctrl MB, create a new cell, and in this cell I'll run the code to display the image cv2 underscore imshow, and in parenthesis I'll give image, the variable in which the data is stored. You can press Ctrl Enter to run the cell. In the meanwhile, I'll open another cell, and when you open this image you will find it exaggeratingly large, so I'll try to resize the image. See, as you can see, the image is way too large to be looked at all at once, so I'll be using a command called cv2.resize to resize this image and make it smaller. I'll be creating a new variable to store the modified data first, and that will be image mod 0, and in it I'll convert the data using cv2.resize and load it. cv2.resize, and in parenthesis we'll be having three parameters to be passed into these parentheses. The first one is the image that you'd like to resize. The second thing is the dimensions to which you'd like them to be resized. I'll be giving 280, 440. And then the final argument will be the method for interpolation. If you don't know what interpolation is, to put it briefly, it's a method, it's an algorithm by which you will resize the image. There are mainly three different methods for interpolation, and if you'd like to know more about them, you can always check out the documentation for OpenCV. Here I'll be using the interpolation method called cv2.inter_cubic. Caps okay, and once this data is stored, we'll use cv2_imshow to display the image again. Now if I press Ctrl Enter, the image will get displayed. Now that this image is more convenient to work with, let's try the color conversions on this image. Ctrl MB. Now we'll first try to create variables that will hold the converted data. I'll create 4 variables: image mode 1, image mode 2, image mode 3, image mode 4. Now that the variables are ready, I will show you the command that we'll use to do the color conversion. It is cv2.convertColor. CVT, and there you have it. Now into this command we'll have 2 arguments. The first argument is the image whose color conversion you want to do, and the second one is what kind of color conversion that you'd like to do. So for all of them, the image that I'm going to pass is the resized image. Now, as for the color conversion, the command's format is cv2.capscolor underscore and the color conversion that you want to do. So the first one, I'll try to convert the color image to a black and white, and the color conversion is called BGR to gray. The second one, I'll be converting the color from BGR to HSV, the third one from BGR to lab, and the fourth one BGR to LUV. Now that we've written the code for the color conversion, the next thing we'll be doing is we'll write a code to display all these images. As you already know, the code is cv2 underscore imshow. Now we'll run the cell and see the output. So as you can see, the first one is from BGR to gray, and this is how the black and white image looks. And the next one, we have converted BGR to HSV. This is how it looks. The third one is BGR to lab, and the fourth one is BGR to LUV. As you might remember, I told you that lab and LUV are very similar color spaces, and hence you can see that even here too. As you can see, both LAB and LUV are very similar except for a slight difference in a shade, and that is because the axis scale is different, though the coordinate system is very similar.